She told me it was the last time. But when her hand lingered on mine, when her eyes couldn't look away, I knew she didn't believe her own words. And maybe neither did I. I never thought a quiet evening in someone else's kitchen could feel like the center of the world. But that's how it was with her. My friend had already left for the night, and somehow I'd ended up lingering, helping his mom tidy up after dinner. It wasn't the first time we'd fallen into that habit, almost naturally, but tonight felt different. The house had that hushed quality it only carried after hours. The ticking of the clock was sharper, the hum of the refrigerator more noticeable. The lights over the counter cast a soft, golden glow, making the air feel warmer than it should. She moved with practiced grace, rinsing plates, stacking them, but her silence carried weight. I watched her hands more than I should have, steady, elegant, with a faint shimmer of water catching the light as she set a glass aside. She was older, yes, but there was something magnetic about the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence of someone who knew who she was, and yet, beneath it, a flicker of something more vulnerable. When she turned to hand me a dish towel, our fingers brushed. Just skin against skin, nothing more, but it landed with the force of a secret. I felt the warmth of her hand, the softness of her touch, and for a moment I didn't move. She didn't either. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and for a heartbeat too long, neither of us looked away. She was the first to break it, always was. A faint, knowing smile curved her lips, but her voice held a seriousness that tightened the air between us. "This shouldn't become a habit," she said softly. Her words sounded like a rule, a line drawn in the sand. But the way she stood so close, the way her breath carried the faint scent of coffee and something floral, contradicted every syllable. I tried to answer casually, to shrug it off, but my voice came out lower than I intended. "We're just cleaning up. That's all." She gave a small shake of her head, not unkind, but resolute. "You know that's not what I mean." And there it was, the unspoken thing suddenly spoken, the confession tucked inside her warning. My chest tightened, because hearing it aloud made it real. It wasn't just me. She felt it too. I looked at her then, really looked. At the gentle lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled. At the way her hair had slipped loose from its clip, brushing against her cheek. I wanted to reach up, to tuck it back into place, but I kept my hands at my sides, fingers curling against the countertop for restraint. The room seemed smaller in that moment. The golden light wrapped around us, the silence deepened, and the distance between us felt both impossibly narrow and impossibly wide. She turned back to the sink, as if retreating to safety, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But the echo of her words, "This shouldn't become a habit," hung in the air like a thread neither of us dared to cut. The next evening unfolded almost the same way. My friend had left early for work, and once again, I found myself in the kitchen with her. It was too easy, helping out, staying a little longer, finding excuses to linger. If I'd been honest with myself, I would have admitted that I wasn't helping her out of politeness anymore. I was staying because I wanted to. Because of the way she made the ordinary feel like something charged, alive. She was leaning against the counter when I walked in, arms folded loosely, her expression calm but careful. The kind of careful you use when you know you're standing too close to fire. "I told you yesterday," she began, her tone gentle but edged. "We can't keep doing this." I stood there for a moment, caught between retreat and something braver. Her words sounded final, but her eyes, when they met mine, betrayed a softness, a hesitation. They flickered down briefly, then back up again, and I could see the war she was waging with herself. I stepped closer, not enough to break her space, but enough that the air shifted between us. "Doing what?" I asked, though my voice was low, as if I already knew the answer. Her lips parted, but no words came out immediately. She drew in a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, as if confiding something she shouldn't. Letting this become more than it should. Her arms unfolded, and she set her hands on the counter behind her, gripping it lightly. The motion pulled her shoulders back, her posture strong, but I caught the faint tremor in her fingers. That tremor told me more than her words. She wasn't just warning me. She was warning herself. The silence stretched, filling the room until it felt heavy, like even the air had thickened. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing outside. My pulse felt louder than both. She moved first. Reaching up, she brushed at my collar, straightening it with the kind of small, instinctive care that didn't belong in a simple friendship. Her touch was light, but I felt it everywhere. Her fingertips grazing the fabric, the warmth of her hand so close to my chest. "This isn't fair to you," she whispered, her voice thick with a mixture of restraint and something that sounded dangerously close to longing. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "You keep saying that." Her hand lingered a second too long before she let the fabric fall back into place. She pulled away slightly, her jaw tightening, but her eyes stayed on mine. And in that gaze, I saw everything she wouldn't admit. The pull she felt, the desire to stay close even while telling me to go. It was written in the way she stood, in the way her breath caught when I shifted nearer, in the way she seemed torn between pushing me away and holding me there. She shook her head softly, as if to remind herself of the line she kept drawing. "This has to stop." But the way her voice faltered at the end, the way her shoulders didn't move when I leaned an inch closer, it all said something else entirely. The strange thing about boundaries is how easily they dissolve in the flow of ordinary life. After that night, she hadn't spoken another warning. Maybe she thought silence would be stronger than words. Maybe she thought if we pretended nothing was happening, it would simply fade. But in truth, it was the smallest, simplest things that pulled us closer. The quiet, domestic moments that looked harmless to anyone else, but felt like secrets to us. It began in the kitchen again. She handed me a dish towel while she washed, and without thinking, I fell into rhythm beside her. The steam rose in soft curls from the sink, carrying the scent of lemon soap. Water splashed as she rinsed a plate, droplets catching on her wrist. I reached out to wipe one away, my thumb brushing lightly across her skin before I realized what I was doing. She didn't move. She only glanced at me, her eyes unreadable but not cold. Then she turned back to the sink, lips pressed together to hide a smile. We laughed over nothing. Over the way I stacked the plates wrong, over how she flicked water at me like a mischievous challenge. Her laugh wasn't loud, but warm, filling the kitchen like sunlight slipping through blinds. It caught me off guard how young she seemed in that moment, her shoulders shaking slightly, her hand pressed to her lips to quiet herself. And then, just as quickly, the laughter would die down, and we'd find ourselves in silence again, standing too close. Her arm brushed against mine as we reached for the same cup, and neither of us pulled back right away. It was just porcelain between our hands, yet the touch sent a current through me that felt far heavier than it should. Later, while we folded laundry together, something I never imagined myself doing, there was a similar softness. She smoothed a shirt with careful hands, and I caught myself watching the graceful way her fingers moved. When she handed me a towel, her fingertips grazed mine. The fabric was warm from the dryer, but her touch was warmer still. It struck me how easy it was to be near her, how natural it felt, as though the world outside those four walls didn't matter when we were side by side. And yet, beneath that ease was tension, like a string pulled taut, invisible but unbreakable. Once, when she leaned down to grab a basket, her shoulder brushed against my chest. She froze for the briefest second, then continued as though it hadn't happened. But I felt her breath catch, just faintly, and that single hesitation told me everything her silence tried to deny. The hours passed unnoticed. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and I found myself craving it more than anything. Not grand declarations, not stolen kisses, just these small, wordless moments where her presence filled the room, where her nearness felt like both a comfort and a temptation. And though neither of us spoke it aloud, we both knew. The more ordinary things we shared, the more impossible it became to call this ordinary at all. It was late, later than I should have stayed. The house had gone still, the kind of stillness that makes you whisper without meaning to. I sat on the couch, flipping absently through my phone, while she gathered the last of the mugs from the coffee table. The soft shuffle of her steps, the clink of porcelain, the faint smell of chamomile tea, All of it felt like part of a ritual we hadn't named, but kept repeating anyway. When she came back, she didn't sit right away. She stood near the edge of the room, her fingers curled loosely around the back of a chair. Her eyes lingered on me, steady but troubled, like she was rehearsing a sentence she didn't want to say. Finally, she breathed it out. "This is the last time." Her tone wasn't sharp, not even stern. It was more like a plea, one she had already given up on believing. I watched her mouth form the words, saw her jaw tighten as though bracing herself, and yet her body didn't move further away. I set my phone aside. "You said that before," I murmured. Her lips curved into a faint, weary smile. "And I meant it. But meaning it doesn't seem to be enough." She came to sit beside me, not at the far end of the couch where distance might have made sense, but close enough that our knees brushed lightly when she settled down. That small point of contact made my chest tighten, as if the air had thinned. "I'm supposed to be the one with control here," she said quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I know better. I've lived long enough to know how this ends." I turned slightly, watching the way her shoulders tensed beneath her sweater, the way her eyes stayed fixed on her own hands instead of me. She looked strong, as she always did, but the tremor in her voice told another story. Slowly, carefully, I reached over and let my fingers brush against hers. Her hand flinched at first, but then she stilled, and after a moment, her fingers relaxed, letting mine slip into the spaces between them. She didn't look up. "This is dangerous," she whispered, though her thumb traced absent circles against my skin. "For you, for me, for everyone." I didn't argue. There was no point. She wasn't wrong. But I couldn't ignore the way she leaned into me ever so slightly, her shoulder pressing against mine, her body betraying the truth her words tried to bury. Her scent was warm, something soft and familiar, a mix of tea and lavender soap. Her hair brushed against my arm as she shifted closer, her breath catching just faintly when our closeness became undeniable. "This is the last time," she repeated again, but the words trembled this time, as though even she didn't believe them anymore. And sitting there, her hand in mine, her shoulder against my chest, I knew that neither of us was ready to let go. She had said it again, the words weighed with caution, repeated like a mantra she was trying to convince herself of. "This is the last time." I looked at her then, really looked, the curve of her cheek, the soft line of her jaw, the way her hair fell over her shoulder in an untamed sweep. Every detail seemed louder in the quiet of the room, magnified by the tension between us. And in that silence, I realized how much I wanted to ease it, not break it, not rush it, just be there with her. "You said that yesterday," I said softly, almost a murmur, letting the words float between us without accusation. Her eyes flicked up at me, wide for just a moment, startled, as if she hadn't expected honesty wrapped in patience. Then they softened, a shimmer of something unreadable dancing in the warm light. I mean it," she replied, voice steady but layered with vulnerability. "I'm serious this time." I tilted my head slightly, trying not to smile, but the corners of my mouth lifted anyway. "I know, and I get it. I really do. But I also know that sometimes words can't contain what we feel. That sometimes the heart has a mind of its own." She looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though her eyes betrayed the war within. She wanted to resist, to remind me of the rules we had unwittingly set, but the truth was written all over her posture, in the tiny tremor when our knees brushed on the couch, in the warmth radiating from her as she leaned closer without thinking. Slowly, I reached out again, not with urgency, but with careful deliberation, letting my hand hover over hers before resting lightly against it. The contact was gentle, skin brushing skin, a whisper of warmth, but it said more than words ever could. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers twined with mine, almost automatically, a silent admission that she felt it too. My thumb grazed her hand in small circles, and I could feel the pulse of her heartbeat beneath her skin, steady yet slightly quickened. "I'm not here to pressure you," I whispered. I don't want to pretend we're not here, not anymore. Not when it feels like this." Her lips parted, almost a sigh escaping. Her head tilted, just slightly, towards me. Not fully resting, not yet, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath against my knuckles. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock, but in that silence, there was an understanding deeper than words. "You're patient," she murmured, finally looking at me. Her eyes glistened with something tender, something she hadn't allowed herself to name before. "Maybe too patient." I smiled, a quiet, steady smile. "Maybe. But maybe that's what makes it easier for us to feel this, without breaking." She exhaled slowly, leaning back just enough to meet my gaze fully. And in that moment, the barrier she had built around her heart seemed to waver. Just a little, but enough. Enough that I could see it, enough that she could feel it, and enough that we both knew this wasn't about defiance anymore. It was about understanding, and maybe even about trust. And for the first time that evening, I didn't feel the weight of what shouldn't happen. I felt the quiet power of what could. The room felt smaller than it had before, though nothing had changed. Just the two of us, sitting close enough that our shoulders touched, our knees brushing lightly, and the air between us charged in a way that made ordinary sounds feel sharper. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, even the distant rumble of traffic outside, all of it seemed to emphasize the quiet that wrapped around us, fragile and electric. She shifted slightly on the couch, and her shoulder pressed more firmly against mine. It was unintentional, I was sure, but it sent a ripple through me, a reminder that boundaries were fading with every shared breath. She didn't pull away. Instead, she stayed, just leaning, just near enough to feel the warmth of my chest through the thin fabric of my shirt. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining almost naturally. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden, desperate gestures, but deliberate in a way that spoke louder than words. I could feel the subtle tension in her palm, the slight tremor in her fingertips, as if she were holding herself back even as she gave herself over. My thumb traced slow circles against her skin, careful, patient, letting her set the pace. Her head tilted slightly, brushing against my shoulder. It was light, tentative, but the warmth of her cheek, the softness of her hair against my arm, made my pulse quicken. I could feel her breath hitch faintly, the smallest catch that made my own breathing shallow. The quiet between us became a language of its own. Every glance, every subtle shift, every soft exhale carrying meaning we didn't need to voice. "I shouldn't," she whispered, voice low, almost lost in the shadows of the room. It's complicated." "I know," I murmured, pressing my fingers gently against hers. "It's always been complicated. But that doesn't make it wrong to feel it, to be here." Her eyes met mine then, steady and unguarded for the first time. I saw the vulnerability she'd been hiding behind quiet smiles and soft warnings. There was longing there, yes, but also fear, hesitation, and the weight of every boundary she felt she had to maintain. I squeezed her hand lightly, letting her know I understood. I wasn't here to rush her, only to be present. She leaned just a little closer, enough that I felt the warmth of her hair against my cheek, the faint brush of her lips as she adjusted her position. My own chest tightened, every nerve alert, every sense focused on the simple fact of her being near me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. There was no need. The quiet was enough, the closeness enough, and the subtle touch of skin against skin enough to speak volumes. In that shared stillness, the tension didn't feel dangerous, it felt alive. Finally, she exhaled, a soft sound that carried relief and acknowledgement. Her fingers tightened around mine ever so slightly, and I felt the rhythm of her pulse, steady yet accelerated. And I realized, as I felt her leaning into me just a fraction more, that this closeness, this unspoken connection, was the first step we had both been waiting for. The tension had peaked, yes, but not in heartbreak. It had peaked in recognition, in acceptance, and in the quiet thrill of two hearts cautiously, deliberately moving toward each other. The night had settled into a comforting hush. The kitchen lights had dimmed to a soft glow, spilling warmth across the living room, turning ordinary shadows into gentle shapes that seemed to lean toward us. We were still on the couch, still close enough that our shoulders pressed together, still holding hands in that careful, patient way that had become a language all our own. She exhaled slowly, her forehead leaning lightly against my shoulder. The weight of her head was subtle, but steady, and it sent a calm through me I hadn't realized I needed. Her hair brushed against my chest, soft and familiar, carrying the faint scent of lavender and chamomile soap, a scent that would now be forever tied to this moment in my memory. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," she murmured, voice low and almost shy, despite the confidence she usually carried. "You didn't," I said softly, my thumb tracing slow, lazy circles across the back of her hand. "We didn't go far. We just noticed each other. And that's okay." Her eyes lifted to mine, shimmering in the golden light. There was a quiet acknowledgement there, a mixture of relief, hesitation, and something tender that neither of us had allowed ourselves to name before. Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile, and for the first time that evening, it felt like the tension between us had eased entirely. She shifted slightly so that her other hand could find mine as well, and soon both our hands were intertwined, fingers woven together in a natural, unforced rhythm. The contact was gentle, reassuring, and it spoke louder than any words could. There was no need for grand declarations, no need to rush into explanations. The simple act of being present, of holding each other's hands, said everything. The quiet stretched, comfortable and safe, as she rested her head more fully against my shoulder. I could feel the rise and fall of her breath, the subtle beat of her heart through her chest, and the warmth of her body as it leaned into mine. I wrapped an arm around her, careful, deliberate, letting her know that she could stay here, exactly where she was, without fear or hesitation. "This doesn't have to end," she whispered, almost as if confessing to herself. "No," I replied, brushing my fingers lightly over hers. "It doesn't. Not unless we want it to." Her hand squeezed mine softly, a quiet agreement. She lifted her head just enough to press a gentle kiss against my cheek. It was fleeting, tender, deliberate, and it carried everything she hadn't said aloud: trust, desire, relief, and a willingness to see where this connection could lead. We stayed that way for a long while, just breathing together, letting the moment stretch without rushing it. Outside, the night continued, indifferent to our small world, but inside, time seemed to slow, allowing us the space to simply exist with each other. I realized then that this was not about breaking rules or defying expectations. It was about patience, honesty, and the quiet courage to let emotions unfold naturally. The warmth between us wasn't just physical. It was emotional, deep and steady, a kind of intimacy that didn't need words. And as I felt her settle more fully into my side, fingers still entwined with mine, I knew that this closeness, this understanding, this gentle, unhurried affection was enough. For tonight, for us, it was everything.